welcome to the People and Purpose and Profits Business Coaching Podcast. My name is Brian Buck, and my wonderful co-host is...
And I'm Kat.
And I am so excited to have one of my fellow lean communicators here with us on the show. Jamie, you want to introduce yourself to the audience and a little bit about what you do and who you serve?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. So I'm Jamie Parker, and you might see me have that as Jamie V. Parker, just because it's a common name. But I'm the founder of Process Plus Results, and we help operations executives really not just gain a competitive edge today and solve their problems of today, but to build leadership teams that are ready to tackle the problems of tomorrow too. So I'm really working with chief operating officers and VPs, and as well as like plant managers and things, really helping them to figure out how can they build better teams and solve organizational problems.
Wow. Fantastic. And we serve primarily small to medium-sized businesses. So what I love about having someone like you on the show is everything you're teaching to bigger organizations not only is super applicable to the smaller companies, but oh my goodness, if they get these habits and these systems in place when they're smaller, when they grow, they are going to be so much more successful. You and I have kind of similar experience that in bigger organizations, we usually have to undo bad cultures or undo bad leadership practices. So I love that you're here today to be able to share some things that's going to really serve our audience well. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So we always like to kick off with our guests. This show is about the balance of people, purpose, and profits. And you want to share a little bit about what that means to you in your coaching and in your business? And is it possible maybe during this season of your business, is one a bigger pull than the other right now? So feel free to answer that, whichever inspires you.
Yeah, well, thanks. And I think it definitely requires all three. And it's interesting because, I like to say that I'm a recovering command and control manager, because I grew up in that space of authoritarian management, push and push and push. It's about the results, get the results, hit your numbers, and almost didn't matter how. And growing up in operations, right? I mean, I've had P&L or profit and loss accountability since I was 22 years old. I've been in positions that were accountable for the bottom line. And so whether it's my clients who are running operations or, your community here, I mean, you're running a business, right? You're accountable to profits. And I can really appreciate that pull and the importance of profits. And at the same time, for so long in my career, that first, 10 years of my career, almost, it was, let me just push and push and push. And I was good at it in the sense that I got promoted fast. It wasn't very sustainable because of the way I was doing it. And someone else had to clean up my mess because I had moved on by that point. But there got to a point about 8 years in, I started realizing like, this is not good. I don't like my job. People don't like working for me. I'm running ragged. I'm burning out. They're running ragged. This is not sustainable. And I started looking for other ways of doing things and of leading, and kind of through my own leadership journey and transformation, as well as kind of bringing in more of the continuous improvement practices and respect for people, foundational elements, watching, videos and learning from people like Simon Sinek and Bob Chapman, who really have that people and purpose foundation. I really made this shift of actually caring about the people. Right. I mean, what a crazy idea here. And what I learned through that, of course, is that when we do this from a people first standpoint, it doesn't mean that we're taking a hit in profits. It means that we can make it more sustainable. And then when you add that layer of purpose in, I think that really is when we get through the tough times, like the times we've spent over the last year. That purpose can really give you the resilience that you need to weather the storm.
Wow, that's really powerful. And you were really young when you were doing all this, and the fact that you had that shift, says a lot about you, who you are as a person, because oftentimes I've seen people with 30, 40, 50 years of experience still doing the same thing. So I really want to ask, what was the shift and why did it happen? What did it look like for the people? That instead of like not liking to work with you or for you, what was it like afterwards?
I wish that I'd been able to go through that transformation all with the same team, to be honest, because, the reality is that some people, so essentially I got a promotion and left and moved to a different division in the company. And I moved from the East Coast out to Denver, Colorado. And so I was working with a new team and kind of made a commitment. I'm not going to end up the same way as I was the last time. And I'd reached out to some of the folks that I used to work for were used to work for me on the East Coast, because like I know they didn't have a good experience. Right.
Mm.
And I know they just didn't get that part of me. But one of the things that was so interesting is that going through this change in how I work with people is that when leaders that were on my team, now let's say I'm leaving or I'm changing territories or I'm leaving the organization, when they talk, they say, you know what, I'm not just a better leader, I'm a better husband, or I'm a better father. And I think that's really that difference, is that it's serving the whole self and valuing the whole person. And it's a shift, because like I have to really believe it. And there was a time where I didn't really believe that. It was like, yeah, whatever, you're here to do a job. You're a pawn on my chessboard.
Mm.
And so, but when you really believe that and treat people that way, it's just such a broader impact.
So was it because maybe you had a change in your or a shift in your identity that you were able to help them do the same?
So it was a combination. It was definitely something I was going through. At the same time, I was exploring lean continuous improvement, which has a tenet and a kind of a foundation in respect for people. And so there was the big piece of this respect for people and respect for humanity. I also kind of had this, like, I don't know, quarter life weird reaction thing. So I can remember this moment. I was out traveling. I was in LA at the time, visiting a plant that was in my territory, and my boss at the time was with me, and we were sitting and we were in the car driving, and I remember telling him, you know what, gosh, I thought I was going to be doing more. I thought I was going to be having a bigger impact. I thought I was going to be doing something more important. And I'm basically running print plants. Like, we print stuff. Come on, we make signs. Like, this isn't life or death stuff. I'm not changing policy. I'm not going to be in the history books. Like, I thought I would be doing more. And he really, he started going through folks, and he started saying, hey, well, let's talk about how you're influencing Jorge, who is a team member there at the LA plant, who is, able to give his children a life that he could have never imagined, because of the changes and the impacts and the career structure and being able to have promotions and gain income, right? Or let's look at this other team member and the influence there. And when he started kind of bringing that to light, that was all happening at the same time. And so it was this culmination. I can't say it was one thing. There were just a lot of things that were adding up to happen at the right time. I feel like that's like the story for a lot of entrepreneurs too,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
When you're going out and you're taking that big bold step, it's usually like a lot of things that kind of add up and pull you to make that decision. I think it was that type of a pull for me too.
That's beautiful.
Well, you bring up the entrepreneur, and I've experienced this with people that I've coached, and the entrepreneurs that I know, that they usually start in the form of the one who does, and then they get a team and they have other people do, but then you go, well, no one loves my business as much as I do, so they're still really involved, and kind of a little bit of that command and control, not because they're control freaks, but it's their baby. And as they get bigger, you can't control that baby anymore. And there's so many opportunities to really shift to that people-centered part. What advice would you have for an entrepreneur who's getting ready to scale that might have been in a gentle, I love my baby command and control to now saying, I got to really focus on the people of my team and trust them with this baby, and that they're going to actually help this baby turn into a teenager and actually
Right.
do more things.
Yeah. No, I
Taking the
totally,
meth a little too
totally
far.
get
Yeah.
it. One of the things that like the leadership kind of techniques, approaches, tactics, behaviors, whatever you want to call it, that I actually think is one of the easiest to do and the most overlooked is how we use recognition. And I'll say this can work for your team, like if you have a team, or if you have maybe some contractors or vendors, you can actually do this type of recognition with clients, even. But it's really about, how do we use recognition in a way that serves two purposes? One is being able to help people, feel valued. And the other is to actually get the future that we want, the desired state, right? And the thing is, there's this big problem with recognition right now. And there's studies that show that in the US, 82% of employees say, I'm not recognized enough for my contributions. Now, if we ask managers or business owners, right, if we go out and ask people who have teams, they're like, what are you talking about? I say thank you all the time, right? What do they want? They want more? I already recognize you. What do you want more? And so there's this disconnect. If 82% say, I'm not recognized enough for my contributions, and we're like, well, what do you want? I mean, I can't, is it like cake and pizza every day, right?
Right.
And so the thing is that we're getting some things wrong. And number one is we're kind of confusing rewards and recognition. We're not talking about cake and pizza. We're really talking about words. Recognition doesn't cost anything. And we're really saying, hey, people want to feel like what they do matters and that they're making a difference. And to do that, we've got it. There are really a couple of elements that we're missing, because what happens a lot, and I see this all the time, is we say, oh, thanks, bud. You're the best. Oh, man, I love it. You always come through for me. And we give these really general pats on the back, right? The attaboy kind of recognition. And the problem is that it doesn't really help in either of the two ways. People don't really feel valued because it's kind of hollow. And at the same time, it doesn't really advance the future that I want, right? Have you ever been on the receiving end of one of those?
Oh yeah, many times.
Yeah. And you're like, okay, I guess.
Yeah. Well, you also even think about the good job, bud. And it's like, how often do people, I ask leaders, can you tell me the names of everyone section underneath you? And boy, there are some nervous faces when I ask that. It's so powerful if they could say, good job, Jamie. Even if just saying their name and personalizing it is a game changer.
Yeah. Well, and even just like we have habits with our words, right? Phrases, like I just say, right. That's what I say all the time, right? So we have these habits with our words. We'll do that with recognition too. And then it really comes across as hollow. I have in one of my client organizations, there's a department manager, who's talking about his military experience. And he had, I don't know what the, branch was or anything like that, but he had a leader. And at first, for the first couple of months, he was reporting to this leader. He's like, man, this is so great. He tells me thank you all the time. This is awesome. But after a couple of months, the leader just kept kind of doing that same, oh, thanks so much. You're awesome. And so then it was like, oh, never mind. He just says that all the time. It's not actually meaningful. And that's what we need to avoid. And there's really two things we've got to include in our recognition that will completely transform the way it's received. And that's first, that we name the specific behavior. So we don't say, hey, thanks, you're the best. Oh, you bailed me out. Oh, love it. You're so great. We say, thanks for doing this thing, right? Thanks for doing this thing. And then the second component is the impact of that behavior. the why it matters, the so what. Right? And that's important because remember, we didn't say 82% said, I'm not recognized enough because I deserve to be, or because I'm, whatever, I don't even want to say millennial because it's not a millennial thing either, but like, because I'm, the entitlement trophy class, right? Or because I, whatever. No, people said, I'm not recognized enough for my contribution. So people aren't saying, oh, give me recognition because I just need the flattery. They're saying that when I make a contribution, when I do something that matters, that's when they want to be recognized. So that's why we want to have that impact. We're saying, thank you for doing this. It causes that. So I might say, oh, thank you for updating the project in the Trello board. It helps all of us stay on the same page of the status.
Boom. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
powerful. Yeah.
Right? So different. And so now what I've done, now they know what they've done and how it matters, how it's helped. And I just recognize something that I'd like to get more of. Do I want that Trello board to be updated and consistent and current? I do. Now I'm recognizing it. It's more likely to happen again. So if I'm, maybe it's a client that has in the past, maybe had a tendency of wanting to go back and forth, and I'm trying to get them to use my calendar to schedule the appointment. And I say, oh, thank you for using my calendar to schedule this appointment. It helps cut down on the back and forth emails, right? So I've asked them to do it this way. They did it. I recognize them for that. Guess what? Next time they're more likely to use that calendar.
That's brilliant. One of the things I'm also hearing in what you're saying too is there's a bit of reinforcing your company's culture.
Yes. Yeah. So I actually call this technique reinforcing feedback because it is feedback. You are giving feedback on the behavior. This just so happens to be that we're reinforcing helpful behaviors instead of what most people think about feedback is they think about correcting unhelpful behaviors, right?
Yeah. Like people take radical candor too far and it's just all the worst stuff. I'm just being honest with you, right? But without the positive, that makes the radical candor stuff so much worse.
Absolutely. Yeah. So if you've ever heard the phrase or felt this way or, something like, I do 10 things right and never hear a word. I do one thing wrong and never hear the end of it. Well, that's what happens because we just want to go to the correcting all the time. And it's natural. I get it. Of course, we want to fix the problems. Of course, that's what we see. We've got profits, right? We still got to hit our numbers. We've still got to, whether it's for our own business or whether it's so that we can provide employment for other people, we have a responsibility to be financially sustainable. And so, of course, we want to go and fix those things. And that's where our brain naturally goes. But if you want people to be more receptive when we give that correcting feedback, then give reinforcing feedback more often. And if we give reinforcing feedback more often, it's going to make people understand that feedback is not good or bad. It's just feedback. Right? We normalize the process of feedback. And because I'm giving you reinforcing feedback on the helpful behaviors, you're going to be more receptive. Like, oh, okay, it's no big deal to fix this other thing that I need to fix because I know that she sees the good stuff I'm doing too. Right. And if you want to like bonus points, really, right. You guys are entrepreneurs, you're A players, you're like go-getters, is you can, when you connect it to the impact, you can connect it to some of those core values, your purpose. Right. So think about what is your purpose of your organization? And you can say, it helps us do this so that we can achieve our purpose, so that it helps us live our core value of this. Right. It demonstrates this core value. You can bring that purpose in there and those values and really show what kind of culture that you want to build.
Going back to something you said, I love how this method diffuses the phrase, can I give you some feedback? Because it's going to be probably more good than bad. So they're like, bring it. I want to hear it.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Because it's so easy when you hear that question, be like, oh my goodness. And even the leader is like getting into crucial conversation mode.
Yeah.
How do I, like, if you just get used to it, it's just how we talk together. It's like you said, it's our culture.
Well, and it's so interesting too, because one of the things I do recommend is that you ask for the permission to give feedback. right? And can I give you, Kate, can I give you some feedback is a great question to ask for that. Because then they get to say, yeah, sure. Or they can say no, right? And you can walk away and say, oh, no problem. I'll check in with you later because you're obviously not in the mood to receive it. And if you're not in the mood to receive it, then me telling it doesn't matter, right? Then it's just not relevant. And people are really resistant to that question because of the fact that feedback seems like it's negative. And so we'll say, oh, well, can I share something with you? And that's fine. You can say, hey, you got a minute? Can I share something with you? That's good enough. Like at least you're asking and you're checking and you're not just assuming and bombarding and going right into their space. But it's funny because I think that there is something to normalizing the word feedback and using the word feedback, even when it is positive recognition, reinforcing feedback, in order to help people understand that that's all it is. So I think that it's something that I actually like to use it. I like to use that phrase, hey, can I give you some feedback? I don't do it all the time, but I do like to do that sometimes, just for that exact purpose, is let's normalize this.
Yeah, and I can definitely see how that puts people in a more positive, frame of mind to be welcoming any type of feedback and not be, thinking, oh my God, something bad is going to happen. It's definitely sets a different tone for the conversations.
Yeah.
What advice do you have? Because I've had this, different teams. There's some people who can't take a compliment. Like giving positive feedback almost makes them squirm. You want to maybe talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess the first piece is that I would still give it, right?
Yeah.
And know that there's something else behind that. So there's something else behind that. And depending on your relationship, if this is someone that you're working side by side in your organization, you're probably going to unpeel some of those layers and understand where that's coming from. If it's a vendor you only talk to occasionally, then you may not get into peeling all of those layers back, but I can still give it and I can say, thank you for doing this. It causes that. I really appreciate it. And then that's it. That's the end of it. I don't have to make it into a big production. So sometimes when people don't like taking compliments, it's because it's being done in this big public forum and we're all applauding and whatever.
Yeah.
Well, okay, I can.
The introverts are like, yeah.
Yeah. So I can avoid the, performance of it, but I can still onto the side say, hey, thanks for doing this. It causes that, and it's really helpful. And, the great news too, is that even in this virtual world, this works over email and it works over text message and it works over Zoom and it works in a handwritten letter. Obviously, of course, the more face-to-face or the more Zoom face-to-face, yes, that's great. But this is one of those things that can just it transcends the different environments. I don't have to have a formal program. I don't have to worry about am I going to embarrass somebody? Because I can just pull them to the side. I can just send them a note one off. If I work closely with them, I might want to peel those layers back.
Yeah.
And if
I just want to.
Yeah, if they're like, no, I don't, it wasn't me, it was them. Say, well, I appreciate your contribution anyways, right? let's just put it there.
And I'm really curious because I know one of the things with positive feedback is it makes people feel that you have a secret agenda. So how do you kind of stay clear of that?
Yeah. So the key is that this should be authentic, right? So I'm not teaching you a Jedi, mind magic trick here. This is something that should be authentic. You should mean it. And if you mean it, then it's right. Then that's going to come through. And if you build relationships, so at the end of the day, right? Bottom line is that leadership is a relationship, right? Leadership is a relationship. So I want to do the other things like having one-on-ones and having some open space to just talk and really listen and ask people for their opinions and share our purpose and share my vision for the company and share the progress of how we're doing. And I want to do all of that. I've got to build that relationship too. So this isn't done in a vacuum. this is just one of the easiest ways, especially when, like, let's say you're working with a contractor and you don't do a ton of work with them, but you've got a part-time contractor. And so they're not part of your inner circle, if you will, but you can still have an influence. Or if you're uncomfortable having those correcting conversations, have these two so it becomes more comfortable. Or as you're building a relationship and maybe some of that, I'm not sure if I fully trust this or not, is still there, right? Trust isn't all the way built. At least you're showing up from a place of positivity and a place of service. And that is going to help as you build that relationship. So it's not, I mean, you still have to do the other leadership stuff too. Right.
Yeah. One thing I've experienced, and I don't know if you've seen this, sometimes as a leader, when we're giving this kind of frequent feedback, there's a lot of power when you actually start to encourage your team to give the same kind of feedback amongst peers.
Mhm.
Have you had experience in taking it from the leader down and helping the peers give it to peers?
Yeah. Well, and it's, most of the work I've done has been with leaders. So they still learn these techniques, if you will. And people are always afraid. So I've actually had, especially when I get kind of frontline leaders, right? So maybe team leads or supervisors, but people who are first-time leaders, and they're kind of afraid that someone's going to find out the formula. But what if they know, then they're not going to trust it, to what Kat was saying, right? And I just don't worry about that, because all we're doing, I mean, we talk about communication all the time. We say, hey, here's a better way of communicating. And hey, if you're doing a slide deck, maybe you want to do this. Like all these other things we talk about, this is totally fine, as long as you're coming from a place of authenticity. And I think when it comes to, peer-to-peer and people on your team saying, hey, let's recognize each other, it's really about giving that space and modeling it. And as you explain, hey, you know what? I appreciate you, this person, right, for doing this. And here's how it made an impact. And maybe even this is how it aligns with our core values, or this is how it's going to help us align with our purpose. As you do that and model it, people will also follow that. There was somebody that I had on an interview that I did with my podcast, and he was talking about how they do this recognition program, and it's peer submissions. And that's what it's like, a 3-question. Who was it? What did they do? And how does it relate to their core values? Those are the 3 questions that they answer. And what they do is they actually put in for a drawing for, I don't know if it's gift cards or whatever it is, but those go to the people that submit it. So it's not for the the recipients get it in front of it, right? They get the recognition, and we have the recognition for their behaviors. But then he also kind of throws in, hey, if you are recognizing your peers, then you're going to go into this drawing for, this gift card, because he's trying to encourage and reward that particular behavior, which is recognizing someone else. But he has on that form, it's 3 questions, and on that form and how does this connect to our core values?
I'm stealing that. I love it. That's so great. So often the people side, the respect for people kind of say, it's the soft stuff. Can you tell me why having a culture of recognition, why is this ultimately better for the business? How does it tie into the hard dollars?
Yeah, it's and I totally get it. I was that person, right? Like, nobody has time to be a softie. Right? We got work to do. And the reality is that, so that movie, right? A League of Their Own, and Tom Hanks, the women's baseball team movie. And there's this iconic scene where he kind of chews out this player, and he walks out the dugout, and he turns around and looks, and she's crying. And he's like, "Are you crying? There's no crying in baseball," right? And I feel like we kind of learn that in business. There's no crying in business. And, we kind of have this idea of check your emotions at the door, or leave your personal problems at home, or, you know what? It's not personal. It's business.
Yeah.
It's not, it's just business. And we have this idea that if there's that personal, emotional side, then that's somehow going to hurt the business side, and that we need to separate. It's not personal, it's business. But the truth is that business is personal, right? And yes, work is made up of processes and systems, but organizations are made up of people. And so this whole human side, right? We're messy, we're complicated, we're emotional, we're weird. We're like, yes, we're all of those things. And your organization is full of them, both from your team side and your client side and your vendor side, all of it, all of it. And so it's something that we can't ignore. We can't just say, check it at the door, because then we're not going to get to a place where people can show up and give everything that they can give. And when we create an environment where people feel valued, they feel like they're making a contribution, they know, because we let them know exactly what the behavior is and how why it matters, they now know what they're doing that makes the contribution, what they're doing that makes a difference. People will do it more, and they are going to show up and they are going to look for, how can I help us be better? And instead of just coming in as, all right, well, I got to get through the day, they're saying, well, how can I make it better? And so, you know what, profits are there. We have an obligation. And I don't think we should, I'm glad you have that as part of one of your three, because I do think sometimes it gets presented like people-centric leadership without consideration of profits. But we do, if you're a business owner and whether it's your own family or solopreneur and it's your own family, or you're providing employment opportunities, you're now part of this economic system. And we have a fiscal responsibility to be able to provide and continue to progress these employment opportunities that we're providing, right? So we can't just say that it's just people. We just need to be nice and all people. No, we have the obligation to profit. The thing is how do we make the decisions? And how am I bringing people in? How am I considering people when I make those decisions? And sometimes the decisions in the short term, it feels painful because you're like, ooh, that's going to cost me money. But in the long term, that's what's going to really advance your organization. That's what's going to get you the commitment. So you don't want to manage by compliance. I don't want to have to manage by compliance and checklist, and I got to come in and audit your work all the time. That's not how we reach
more work and not fun work for a leader.
No, and we can't reach these big lofty goals that we have if we're having to manage the compliance. We've got to inspire commitment, because then I don't have to come in and audit everything. Then people are asking, what else? How else can I help? And so that's why we've got to do, I know it's the soft stuff, but it's really the hard stuff.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Well, and you kind of had it in there, but one of the things I like to teach is happier employees are more productive.
Exactly.
Because they have more capacity than they're giving if they aren't bringing their whole self. If you tell them to check part of their selves at the door, it doesn't come back magically. And so it's going to really raise your productivity, which lowers your costs. And then I love how you even added, they are going to be interested in improving what exists because now they belong. It's not just a transactional thing, but it's a part of who they belong with. And then also to tie up what I was thinking, the nature of business today is they call it relationship marketing. It's relationships between companies and clients now. And if the way we treat our employees ultimately is how our employees treat our clients.
Yes.
And so it will really mirror that. So I love how you use this framework of, it's actually harder to do the softer stuff, but it's going to lead to better profits.
Yeah. It does. And it's so, I mean, I know sometimes you're like, oh, golly, are you kidding me? I got people stuff. Oh, and I get that, but man, when you really invest in it, it's not an overnight thing, but when you really invest in that, and it's an investment, just like you would make an investment on a coach, just like you would make an investment in software, you're making an investment of your time and energy to building strong relationships with people, whether it's people on your team or contractors or vendors or partners or clients. Right?
Yeah, that investment. And that's exactly what I was going to say. It is an investment. And oftentimes, we are so used to thinking short term and not really think the long term. And that's really what takes away that commitment. And once we change the picture around and we do understand that the people around us, whether as the leaders or the people who are our customers, are part of that investment, it changes the dynamic.
Yeah. And people want to be a part of something bigger.
Exactly.
Like we do. We want to be a part of something bigger. So give them an opportunity to be a part of something bigger.
Yeah, that's how we're wired.
Well, one way that people can be a part of something bigger is to connect with you, Jamie, after the show. We're at the time, and we could, oh my goodness, we could keep talking. This could be the 5-hour podcast. And I think we would only start to talk, start to get deep on some of this. But what is the best way for our audience to connect with you, see what you're doing, hear where you're at, and just continue getting amazing value like you provided today?
Yeah. So the best way is to head to my website, which is processplusresults.com. And there you can sign up for some free training. I also host a podcast called Lean Leadership for Ops Managers. So at that website, you can find all of those episodes. And if you want to connect with me directly, you can find me on LinkedIn. Remember that middle initial. So it's Jamie V. Parker at LinkedIn.
Wonderful.
Wonderful.
And our audience can subscribe to the YouTube channel, comment, or if you don't like to look at us, subscribe to the audio podcast. And we also have a Facebook group where we post episodes every time we release them. And it gives you the opportunity to interact with Kat and I and other business owners. So this isn't just meant to have this is interesting information. We want you to start to apply it, and it's easier to apply if you create groups doing that, or have Kat or I or Jamie come in and help you make it, because it really is going to be an investment that's going to take your business to a whole nother level. So thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing everybody next time.
That was so amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.